911, where is your emergency?
Across the nation, a serial has targeted unsuspecting women.
There is new evidence on the other, a profile of a possible killer.
Is she breathing? I don't think so.
For years, women have been murdered and violated at the hands of men who believed that it was their right. Sexual violence is such a pressing issue all over the world. But what's crazier is when a man commits an act of violence against a woman. Sometimes she will be blamed, but some crimes are so horrendous, not even the stupidest member of society can point a finger at the victim. Today we have the strange case of Regina Walters, who ran away from home and was met with a horrible fate. Taken captive for multiple days by the truck stop killer, who became notorious for holding one of the cruelest photo shoots this world has ever seen. Then let's talk about the gruesome murder of college student Faith Hedgepeth, who was murdered in cold blood inside of her own room as she slept. After almost a decade of no answers, the whole world was stunned when a man was found to be a perfect match for the killer's DNA. But why did he decide to kill the girl so ruthlessly? And then we're telling you the story of 19-year-old Winene Murtiana, who was lured into a post office where she was then violated and thrown away by a worker who she had been on friendly terms with in the past. But wait till you find out how this fearless girl battled for every last breath she took that day.
In September 1990, some months after Regina and her boyfriend disappeared, police would find the skeletal remains of Regina K. Walters. She was found in Illinois, and her remains were found in this exact abandoned farmhouse. About a month later, the body of Ricky Lee Jones would also be found at a different location.
Regina K. Walters was a 14-year-old girl with her whole life ahead of her, when suddenly, all of it was taken away from her in the blink of an eye. Like all girls in their teenage years, when Regina turned 14, she went through her rebellious phase. However, she took things a bit too far and ended up running away from home with her boyfriend, Ricky Jones. Jones had been through a pretty rough childhood after he was kicked out of his home and had to grow up in foster homes. As a result of his turbulent upbringing, Jones, who was 18 when he first began dating Regina, had experienced his fair share of run-ins with the law. So it was a surprise when he got together with shy, meek Regina. But, well, the two seemed to be pretty in love with each other. And their love was only confirmed when the pair decided to leave everything behind and run off to Mexico in February of 1990. However, little did they know that this trip was going to change everything, and not in the way that the couple had planned. On their way to Mexico, the couple had to hitchhike out of Houston, and as they were doing so, a truck driver rode up to them, offering them smiles and a lift. But what Regina and Ricky didn't know was that the man pretending to be concerned about them was actually Robert Ben Rhodes, a criminal who is known as the truck stop killer. When Rhodes came across the couple, he had already tortured and murdered about 2 people, and he was searching for his next victim. After graduating from high school, Robert Ben Rhodes joined the Marine Corps, and people believed him to be an innocent young man who would go out of his way to help everyone around him. But what no one knew was that he came from an extremely troubled home. When Robert joined the military, his father was arrested for assaulting a 12-year-old girl at the same time. The guilt was too much for him to bear, and he ended himself while waiting for the trial to take place. However, it was later revealed that the person behind the crime wasn't his father, but Robert himself. Some say that he may have picked up sadistic tendencies from home, and others believe that Robert was just born that way. Robert was let go of the Marine Corps when he was found guilty of robbery. He then tried and failed to join the police force because of his criminal record in the military. As a last resort, Rhodes decided to go to college, but he dropped out within a few days, and with no other option in sight, he had to become a long-haul truck driver. That gave Robert the perfect front for him to start living a life of crime. And, well, let's just say that his violence did not come as a surprise. Robert had been married multiple times in his life, and all of his ex-wives described him as borderline insane. He was verbally, physically, sexually, and emotionally abusive towards all of his partners, who claimed that the man had some kind of weird fetish for inflicting pain on others. He was also into extreme intimacy and forced his wives to engage in violent acts, lashing out at them if they refused to comply with his wishes. Robert's first recorded murder took place in January 1990 when he offered a man called Douglas Zykowski and his wife, Patricia Candace, a ride as they were going from Georgia to Seattle. The unsuspecting couple accepted Robert's ride, and this was the perfect chance for the criminal to shoot and end Douglas right in front of his helpless wife. He then took Patricia home, where he locked her up in a self-made torture room for over a week while he continued to assault and violate her before murdering her and dumping her body in the Millard County, Utah, where it was discovered 9 months later. And that was only the beginning of Rhodes's crimes. His next victim was an 18-year-old woman from Houston who Roberts picked up using his truck and then took her back to his torture chamber. The ruthless murderer then cut the girl's hair and tortured her in unspeakable ways. Thankfully, she was able to find the right time to run away, but for some reason she was too paranoid to file a case or identify her abuser. According to the girl, she begged Robert to let her go and promised that she would never tell a soul. As some kind of sick game, Robert asked the girl to run and chase after her with a huge hunting knife. Thankfully, she was able to hide in the right place, and Robert ultimately had no choice but to drive away after he wasn't able to find her for a few hours. And then we have the case of Regina K. Walters. Just like the rest of his crimes, Robert instantly killed her boyfriend and then took her back to his torture chamber. However, this time around, the insanity of the torture reached a brand new level. The truth is that Robert liked to pick up hitchhikers and streetwalkers because he knew that these people had no one to check up on them. And this is what allowed his crimes to go unchecked for a long time. In addition to assaulting Regina, Robert would also go to a payphone to call up her father and tell him how much he was enjoying torturing his daughter. Regina's family did everything they could to try and find the poor girl, but her murderer left no trace of where he was hiding. As his final move, Robert took Regina to an abandoned farmhouse where he cut off her hair, shaved her pubic hair, and inflicted all kinds of torture on the poor girl. He then forced her to wear high heels and a black dress because he wanted to do a photo shoot of her. The criminal then continued to make the poor girl pose for pictures in a barn, and one of these snapshots was released to the public, showing a horrified Regina looking straight into the camera before Rhodes went ahead and ended her life. Rhodes killed Regina in the most brutal way possible, strangling her with a baling wire and then abandoning her body in the barn. Forensics experts say that the murderer kept on hurting the girl way past her death, showing that there was something really mentally wrong with him. Robert then went to a payphone to call Regina's dad, telling him that he had cut her hair short. The criminal hung up when Regina's dad asked if his daughter was still alive.
In March of 1990, Pasadena, Texas police detective Suzanne Jackson continued her search for 14-year-old Regina K. Walters. The girl hadn't been seen since early February when she left a friend's house with her 18-year-old boyfriend, Ricky Lee Jones.
Regina's body was discovered in September 1990. However, the authorities couldn't trace the murder back to Ricky. However, Robert was arrested in April 1990 when his truck was pulled over and the police discovered a mobile torture chamber at the back of his truck, where Robert was actually holding yet another woman captive. The woman was naked and screaming for help, and that helped the police identify Rhodes as the killer that they had been looking for a long time. In his truck, the police found all kinds of chains, whips, pins, and sex toys that the man used to torture his victims. This is also where the police found those fateful pictures of Regina and were able to link her murder to the cruel truck driver. And that was all it took for the man to be instantly arrested and charged with 3 counts of the recorded murder. However, investigators believe that he actually killed around 50 people between the years of 1975 and 1990, committing around 3 murders every month, preying on helpless women who had nowhere else to run. Today, he is over 76 years old and is thankfully locked behind bars, which is where he will remain for the rest of his life.
And And nearly 4 years after the murder of UNC student Faith Hedgepath, her family is still no closer to having closure. The 19-year-old was found to death inside of her Chapel Hill apartment. To this day, her murder remains unsolved.
Faith Hedgepath was a 20-year-old undergraduate student in her junior year at the University of North Carolina. The girl had her whole life ahead of her. She was happy and loving and did everything she could to help the people around her. So it was a very sad day when the girl's body was discovered lifeless. Death, with some kind of blunt instrument. The girl who was aspiring to be a pediatrician after she graduated never got to make her dream come true.
She was a great person, an awesome student.
Every year, right around this time, it brings a somber reminder to a Warren County family.
Time heals nothing. You just adapt and go on with life, because you have to.
Her life came to a halt on September 7th, 2012, when she was found lifeless in her Chapel Hill apartment. Faith grew up in Hollister, North Carolina, as a part of the Howley-Saponi tribal community. Faith lived with her parents, Ronald and Connie, along with her elder sister, Rolanda, who is 18 years older than Faith. Growing up, Faith had always been a gifted child, and when it was time for her to go to college, she received a Gates Millennium Scholarship for advanced minority students. The girl was also extremely hardworking and constantly worked part-time jobs to make extra money on the side. Even when she passed away, she was still employed at the Red Robin restaurant. All of this was because she wanted to keep working towards her goal of pursuing a career in medicine. So what happened to Faith on that fateful night of September 6th, 2012? Faith was an active member of her college community. On the last night of her life, she was at an event for one of the sorority houses at UNC, and after that she decided to hit the library with her friend, Karina. On Thursday, September 6, 2012, the day before Hedgepath was killed, she attended a recruitment event for Alpha Pi Omega around 6 p.m., according to police, and then went to Davis Library on the UNC campus with her friend and roommate, Karina Rosario. The two girls came home at around 7:30 p.m. to their shared apartment. However, late that night, the two decided to go to Chapel Hill nightclub, but they decided to call it a night because Rosario wasn't feeling well. They came back home at around 2 a.m., and Faith went to sleep. Rosario left the house once again, this time picked up by a male friend. Rosario admitted that she left the door unlocked while Faith slept, and that was the move that ended the poor girl's life.
Durham 911, where is your emergency?
I just walked into my apartment and my friend was just like, she's unconscious.
Okay, what's your address, ma'am? Give me the address.
I just moved here. I'm about to, oh my God. It's 5639 Old Chapel Hill Road in Durham.
When Rosario came back home at 11 a.m. the next morning, she came back to the apartment being an absolute mess, which was very unlike Faith. As the girl moved further in, what she saw left her scarred forever. Rosario and her friend Marisol discovered Faith's lifeless body lying on her bed with a pool of blood collecting under her head. The two girls immediately called the police, telling them that their friend was unconscious and that the house had blood everywhere.
She's unconscious. I just walked in the apartment and there looks like there's blood everywhere.
Okay, listen, how old is she?
She's 19.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't want to touch her, but...
Listen to me. Is she breathing?
I don't know.
You need to check and see. Is she breathing?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Okay, listen to me.
There's blood everywhere.
There's what?
There's blood everywhere.
Okay.
I don't know what happened.
When the police arrived on the scene, they came across Faith's body in the weirdest position possible. She was hanging off the bed. Her face was up, and the only article that she was wearing was a black shirt that was pulled up over her head to cover it.
When you touched her, how did she feel? Does she feel warm?
No, she feels cold.
She feels cold? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Don't touch anything else.
Of course, her death was instantly suspected to be a murder, and the autopsy showed that the cause of Hedgepeth's death was severe blunt force trauma to her head. And not just that, but the girl had cuts and bruises all over her body. Her blood was all over the floor and walls of the room, which proved that the way in which she was killed was nothing less than brutal. Upon further investigation, the police also came across a Bacardi peach rum bottle in the kitchen that was later on discovered to have been the murder weapon. The forensic experts were able to find DNA fragments on the bottle, along with semen samples on Faith's body, proving that she had been violated before she was brutally murdered. What's even stranger is that the police also found a white fast food bag from Time Out with an alarming message written on it. The message read, "I'm not stupid and jealous." And what's even stranger is that the bag did not have any blood splattered on it, unlike everything else in Faith's room. And to add yet another twist to this gruesome story, one of Faith's friends also came across a voice message from a call that the victim had accidentally made to her on the night of her death. She's heard screaming and struggling against someone in the voice message. However, the police have ruled it out as substantial evidence for that specific incident. When all of this came to light, the Chapel Hill authorities launched a thorough investigation to bring justice to the poor girl. They interviewed and questioned thousands of suspects and conducted several DNA tests, but to no avail. 2 years after the gruesome murder, the police started to look into two of Rosario's ex-boyfriends, who they were very believed to have been in close contact with Faith, with one of them even threatening to kill the girl if she didn't force her roommate to get back with him. Sadly, none of their DNAs matched, and the police had to let go of that hunch. To cover every single base, the authorities even used DNA phenotyping to artificially generate an image of the suspect who appeared to be a Latino man. But well, let's just say that the case had to be closed because all leads were dead ends. However, 9 full years after Faith was murdered, the Chapel Hill authorities were able to revisit the evidence collected years ago and analyze it using modern technology. This analysis led the police straight to a 28-year-old man named Miguel Enrique Salguero Olivares, whose samples were a perfect match to the ones found on Faith's body. The discovery comes almost a decade after the girl's unfortunate passing. But not only was Miguel a match for the DNA, but his palm prints also matched the ones found on the wine bottle, confirming the hunch.
When I cried, it was tears of joy, tears of relief, knowing that someone had been arrested.
However, the man's motive for the murder is still unclear, and the authorities are still looking into the investigation. Still, Olivares is currently in police custody and has been charged with first-degree murder. And while the details of his relationship with the victim have not been brought to light, at least Faith's family can rest easy knowing their daughter's death has not gone in vain.
An emotional send-off, paying tribute to a daughter, sister, friend, a special person to those close to her. She's been described as honest, beautiful, vibrant, intelligent, gentle, brave, and unique. Family and friends are distraught.
The murder of 19-year-old University of Cape Town student Yunene Martuana enraged the world like no other. The girl was studying to become a filmmaker and was a student throughout her life. Born in East London to parents Noma and Philip Martuana, lovingly known as Nene, the victim had a perfect life. She had plans, and she was working towards them at full speed, until the fateful day of August 24th, 2019, when she went to pick up a parcel at the post office and never returned back. Nene had been waiting for a package to arrive a month before she was brutally murdered, so she went to the post office and spoke to a man named Luande Botha about her concern. A few weeks later, the man rang her up saying that the parcel had finally arrived. However, when the girl reached the post office, she found out that the worker had plans of his own. As soon as Nene entered the post office, Botha attacked her. Then, behind locked doors, the man violated and assaulted her. And while the girl fought back bravely, she was no match for him. At the end of it all, the cruel murderer decided to strangle Nene to end her life once and for all. When that didn't work, he picked up a 2-kilogram weight and put her to death as she attempted to make one last getaway. The man then stuffed her into a safe to hide all the evidence of his crime and returned the next day to finish the job. Nene's body was then taken to a field where the man doused her with petrol and set her on fire. The 42-year-old police officer then made a getaway before anyone could catch him. And well, his plan seemed to work. That is until people on the internet started a movement for the missing girl, and the hashtag #BringNene started to trend, bringing attention to the crime. The movement only escalated when the girl's body was found in a hole dug near a railway track. And it was so disfigured from the burning that it took a few days for the forensic experts to finally identify it as hers. This led to further probing, and the police were able to collect witness statements proving that the post office was the last location where the girl was spotted. This led the police to Luyanda Botha. And as soon as the man was caught, he was arrested and confessed to his crimes. Botha received 3 life sentences for the rape and murder of Moitiana. And not just that, but Botha's arrest also led to a larger conversation about femicide and gender-based violence in South Africa. After Botha was found guilty, the South African public started circulating a petition asking for the man to be given the death penalty.
Not been an easy journey. Even today, as we are commemorating her life after 3 years of her passing, I think it's a bittersweet moment in the sense that really would have loved her to be here.
Hundreds of South African women came out to the streets to protest, and their struggle was acknowledged by none other than the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan.
And her absence are felt.
Hundreds of people gathered to pay tribute to the girl at her public funeral, with her friends and family coming together to celebrate Nene's life instead of dwelling on the brutal way in which she was taken from us. So while Nene's brutal murder shook an entire nation, it also forced them to confront the dark realities of society and stand up for all the girls who have fallen prey to them.
I'm sorry, did you say Satan? The young man standing on my porch nodded eagerly. Yes, sir, he said. We have come to spread the message of our Lord and Savior, Satan. I looked from him to his companion. Both were dressed in ill-fitting white button-down shirts and black slacks, with gelled-up, side-parted haircuts and slightly manic smiles. Okay, I said. Well, I'm not really into the Lord and Savior thing, so I think I'm gonna have to pass. I closed the door, only to find the young man's foot obstructing it. I opened it back up and sighed. Just a minute of your time, sir, the young man said. Perhaps a look at our literature could convince you. The other young man lifted up his suitcase and popped open the latches. When I saw what was inside, my heart nearly jumped out of its chest. Is that real? I asked. Oh, yes, sir, the first man said. Go ahead and take a closer look. I slowly reached out and picked up one of the bundles and inspected it. I'm no expert, but it certainly looked like a real stack of $100 bills to me. I looked from the money to the creepy but overall harmless-seeming young men, and then I waved them inside. We sat down around my coffee table, and there was a moment of awkward silence. So, I began, clearing my throat. My name's David, and you two are? Oh, forgive my rudeness, sir, the first young man replied. I'm Acolyte Paul, and this is Acolyte Stephen. Well, would you like anything to drink? Oh, no, sir. We do not require sustenance as mortals do, said Paul. Right, I said. I picked up my half-finished beer from the night before and took a swig. The 2 young men just sat in silence, grinning at me as I drank. I coughed a little bit at the end of the beer and wiped the foam from my lips. You said you came to spread a message, right? I asked. So what's the message? We're really glad you asked, said Paul. Satan is recruiting for skilled labor positions in hell. We have identified you as a top candidate. Congratulations, sir. This is fantastic news for you. My eyes wandered to the suitcase full of money. And, what does this job consist of? I asked. Asking all the right questions, Paul replied. You're a sharp guy, David. The details are laid out in this contract here. Stephen? Stephen produced a single piece of paper from somewhere I couldn't see and laid it on the coffee table. I picked up the paper and stared at it. This is the contract? I asked. Oh, yes, sir, said Paul. What language is this? It's written in Old Enochian. Sir, the language of angels. I set the contract back down on the table. Well, what does it say? I asked. I'm sorry, sir, said Paul. I can't read Old Enochian. We're just instructed by our superior to deliver the contract along with your signing bonus. A signing bonus? I asked. Stephen popped open the latches to the suitcase once again. So you're telling me, I said, setting down my beer, that if I sign that piece of paper, you're going to give me a suitcase full of money? Yes, sir, that's the deal, Paul said enthusiastically. I took another swig of beer. Got a pen? I asked. Paul handed me the pen, and I scribbled my name messily on the bottom of the paper, which Stephen promptly snatched up and stowed away somewhere I didn't see. Wow, that's great, said Paul. I guess we'd better go now. All right, I said. I'll see you later. Oh, very funny, sir, said Paul. Of course I meant we three had better go. What do you mean by... My voice was cut off by a roaring sound as the three of us fell through the floor. Hot air rushed past us as we fell toward a distant red glow below us. Paul and Stephen's faces remained frozen in their manic grins as their ties flapped up and whipped around their faces. We fell hard on the glowing red dirt below, sending up a cloud of dust around us. When the dust cleared, I found myself in a strange cross between a cave and an office, facing a large obsidian desk, behind which sat a high-backed leather chair. The chair slowly swung around to reveal a smiling red demon in a suit.
Hi, David. I'm Satan. Now, let's talk about that job.
What in God's name is going on here? I sputtered out. Satan arched one of his thin black eyebrows.
In whose name?
He said. I just meant... I began, before Satan cut me off with good-natured laughter.
I'm only joking,
Satan said.
But boy, do you ever not know how to read a room, Jerry. You're gonna have to work on that, if you're going to succeed down here in hell.
But my name's David, I said. Satan opened a manila file folder on his desk and slipped on a pair of pince-nez reading spectacles. He scanned the folder for a moment before looking back up at me.
You're not Jerry Smith, satanic cult leader and master of unholy magic?
He asked. No, I'm an accountant, I replied. Satan scratched at his goatee.
Well, that's not good at all,
he said.
Do you at least have a bachelor's degree in unholy magic?
No, I said. Is that even a thing that exists?
Of course it is,
said Satan.
We have an online program at the University of Phoenix.
Oh, I said. But isn't that place kind of,
A scam?
He said.
Why? Because they lure naive young people in with the promises of a better future and then bilk them out of thousands of dollars, all in exchange for a degree not worth the paper it's printed on?
Yeah, I said. That was the reason I was thinking of.
Jerry,
said Satan, shaking his head. My name's actually...
I know that to the less enlightened that may seem like a scam,
he went on.
But here in hell, we call that a masterclass in practical business ethics. Plus, due to some clever legal maneuvering, we have the implicit right to employ 20% of their graduates after death.
Okay then? Satan sighed and closed the folder before slipping off his spectacles and setting them down gently on the desk.
Well,
he said,
I can tell you're probably not going to be a good fit here, but seeing that you've already signed the contract and there are pretty steep penalties for breach, you're just going to have to do your best.
He redirected his attention to the corner of the room where Paul and Stephen stood, still sporting their manic Cheshire cat grins.
And as for you two,
he said,
change out of those human suits. You're giving me the creeps.
Yes, sir. Right away, said Paul. There was a wet tearing noise, and Paul and Stephen's faces split down the middle as two gargantuan, insect-like heads sprouted from their necks. The rest of the skin slid off onto the floor like a pile of discarded clothes. Satan shook his head as he regarded the two now stark naked demons standing in his office.
Don't you guys wear clothes under those suits?
He said. Sorry, Mr. Satan, sir, said Paul. It's really hot with clothes on underneath.
You do realize we're currently in hell, right?
Said Satan.
You guys should be used to the heat by now.
Yes, Mr. Satan, sir, said Paul. Satan sighed and pressed a little red button on his phone handset.
Tina?
He said.
Yes, Mr. Satan?
Came a tired-sounding female voice.
Can you please send in Fiersnell and escort acolytes Paul and Stephen to the pain monster down in HR?
Yes, Mr. Satan.
The door of the office opened and a giant blue-skinned demon with a hatchet embedded in the back of his skull entered. He slung the two acolytes over his shoulder and carried them screaming out of the office.
I should have fired those two a long time ago,
he said, shaking his head.
But they're my wife's nephews. What can I do?
I don't know, I replied. As Satan skimmed the manila file folder on his desk, I eyed the two suits of human skin in the corner of the office, wondering if they had used to be filled with humans instead of demons. My thoughts were soon interrupted by Satan clearing his throat.
Well, no sense in wasting time,
he said. Let's get down to brass tacks.
I assume you're familiar with Orsnack's law of eternal soul entropy and hyperinflation?
Orsnack's what? I asked. Satan sighed and scribbled a note in a folder.
Well, at the very least, you should be acquainted with Baal's index of human evil and the correct way to measure a soul's value in micro-Hitlers,
he said. I shook my head. Sorry, no, I said. Satan frowned and scribbled another note inside the folder. Then he shut it and tossed it into the fireplace in the back corner of the office. The fire flashed bright purple for a moment, and then the file was gone.
That's all right,
he said with an easy smile.
It's all relatively straightforward. I'm sure you'll pick it up in no time. In the meantime, though, I'm going to assign you a training officer to help you learn the ropes and monitor your progress.
Satan pressed a button on his phone handset.
Tina?
Yes, Mr. Satan?
A tired-sounding female voice replied.
Can you send in Frank and Teddy?
Yes, Mr. Satan.
Satan released the button, and a moment later, the office door burst off its hinges and an enormous demonic teddy bear lumbered into the office. His fur was gray and spotted with what looked suspiciously like old bloodstains, and one of his eyes glowed red like burning coal. When he spoke, it was a deep, resounding baritone that was so loud that it chattered my teeth.
Yes, Lord Satan. Hello, Frank and Teddy,
said Satan.
This here's Jerry Smith, Master of Satanic Accounting. I need you to show him the ropes on the new project they're running out in Daryl's apartment. Do you think you can do that for me? I shall complete my task or die in the course of its glorious undertaking,
Frank and Teddy said. Then turning his attention to me, he said,
Come, human. We have work to do.
Yet when I tried to stand, I found my legs to be strangely uncooperative. My stomach was squirming, and the demon's ember eye felt like it was burning a hole in me from across the room. Satan? I asked.
Yes, Jerry?
You don't, have any, human training officers, do you?
Why? Are you some kind of racist or something?
Said Satan. No, I mean, are teddy bears even technically a race?
I am a commander in Satan's demonic legion,
boomed Frank and Teddy.
Not a teddy bear.
Really insensitive, Jerry,
said Satan, shaking his head.
Besides, you've got no need to worry. Frank and Teddy is one of our finest training officers. He's only authorized to use lethal force in extreme circumstances.
Oh, I said. That's comforting.
Come, tiny human,
boomed Frank and Teddy. He motioned for me to follow him out of the office, and I did so. When we got to the hallway, he said,
It is time for your first and most important lesson, human. In the everlasting kingdom of hell, all circumstances qualify as extreme.
I felt my knees weaken a little. I opened my mouth to reply, but all that came out was a slight gasping sound. The hallway that Frank and Teddy and I walked along was filled with closed doors, screams emanating from the rooms behind them. I felt a deep sense of dread beginning to bubble in my stomach. I hope that I'm still alive in a few days' time.